Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Om Sri Mahaganapataye Namaha Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Padyantam Vande Guru Paramparam Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः ओम श्री मेधा दक्षिणामूर्ति स्वामिने नमः। ओम सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरिः ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ओम। Namaste once again, everyone.
Namaste, Guruji.
Namaste. आनंद प्रतिबिंब चुंबित तनुः वृत्तिस्तमो जृंभिता स्यादानंदमय प्रियादिगुणकः स्वेष्टार्थलाभोदयः पुण्यस्यानुभवे विभाति कृतिनामानन्दरूपः स्वयं भूत्वानन्दति यत्र साधु तनुभृन् matra prayatnam vina. So we are seeing the 57th sloka of our selection of 108. And now we have entered into the topic of Anandamaya Kosha from this verse onwards. And as I said, this will be covered in 3 verses, 57, 58 and 59. And in the last class, we were discussing some background information for understanding this verse. As I said, Anandaha, simple meaning is happiness, which we all know is an experience. And we discussed about a gross misconception that most people have about happiness. We know that happiness is an emotion associated with the mind. When I say I am happy or I am experiencing happiness in my mind, the question is, where does that happiness come from? Because this moment, my mind is not experiencing happiness, but the next moment, my mind experiences happiness. So the happiness has come into the mind from somewhere. From where has it come? That is the question. Suddenly my mind has become happy. And therefore happiness should have come from some source external to the mind. This is our conclusion. So far so good. Nothing wrong with that conclusion. But when we analyze the sequence of events as to what led to the happiness experience, we discover that there was a desire in the mind to start with, to gain some object or relationship or a situation, which was causing agitation in the mind. The mind was disturbed because of that, because of a desire. I want to get that. I want to get that. And when the desired object or relationship or situation was gained, the mind became happy. And therefore, we hastily conclude that the source of our happiness is the desired object or relationship or a situation. And therefore, we attribute the sense objects as the source of happiness because that is what our experience is. But then Vedanta steps in and challenges this experience based conclusion. Vedanta says you are wrong, my dear. When Vedanta says that, we get a shock. We are in disbelief. And Vedanta reveals that there is only one source of happiness in this entire creation. And that source of happiness is Atma, your inner self, which is one and only, Advitiyam, eternal and all pervading. So I said Atma is otherwise called Brahman. So Brahman or Atma, which is only one, that non-dual Brahmatma is the only source of happiness, says Vedanta. And why is that so? It says because happiness is the very nature of Atma. There is nothing else in this entire creation which has got happiness as its nature. Now we are a little bit confused. All along, Vedanta was saying that consciousness is the nature of Atma. Now, Vedanta says happiness is the nature of Atma. Ananda is the nature of Atma. Which one is correct? The answer is both are correct. As we have already seen, Atma or Brahman has got three features, three aspects. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Chit is consciousness. Sat is existence. Ananda is happiness. All these three are features of Atma. But all along, we have been focusing only on one feature, which is Chit aspect, consciousness aspect. Now, one more feature is added as the nature of Atma. And so, like consciousness, Vedanta says that happiness also is the nature of Atma and Atma alone. Then the question is, what about Anatma? Veda says, Anatma, even though experientially it appears to be the source of happiness, it is not. Veda says that Anatma cannot be the source of happiness because Anatma does not contain even a minuscule of happiness in it. What has got happiness only can share that happiness. If there is no happiness in a source, how can happiness come out of this source? This much we saw in the last class. Now the question is, what about the mind? Because we are experiencing happiness in the mind. Veda says your mind is also anatma only. It is limited and does not contain happiness. Then we are back to square one. The question is still unanswered. Whenever the mind becomes happy, from where does that happiness come? Upanishad says the happiness comes to the mind from the Atma. Previously, we said mind borrows consciousness from Atma. Now we are adding another very big dimension. Not only the mind borrows consciousness, mind also borrows happiness from Atma alone. The only difference is it borrows consciousness all the time, which is continuously available throughout the waking period and even during the dream state. But mind borrows happiness also from Atma alone, but not all the time. That borrowing is only now and then, on occasions. And therefore, the five features that we saw for consciousness, Vedanta applies to happiness also. Now, do you remember the five features of consciousness? Well, these five features in Vedanta, if you are studying, will come back again and again and again. Now, let us apply the same to happiness. What is that? Happiness is not a part, product, or property of any sense object, including the mind, which are all anatma. First feature of the out of the five features. Happiness is an independently existent spiritual principle which pervades the mind now and then. What does that mean? During conducive occasion, it pervades or gets reflected in the mind, and that reflected happiness is called pratibimbananda. Previously, we talked about pratibimba chaitanyam. Now we are talking about pratibimba ananda. So with this reflected happiness, the mind becomes occasionally happy. Second feature. Now third feature. Happiness is not limited by the boundaries of any sense object, including the mind. Like consciousness, happiness is all pervading. This is the third aspect. What is the fourth aspect? Happiness continues to exist even when the mind is resolved. The original happiness continues to exist even the mind, when the mind, the reflecting medium, is gone. Only thing is that happiness, original happiness, continues in a non-experiential form. And it continues to exist in the form of consciousness, or in the form of purnatvam, it continues. The ever available pure original happiness, the Bimbananda, is not available for experiencing at all times, since the manifesting medium, a conducive mind, is not available. Just like consciousness, consciousness we cannot experience without this body, mind, sense complex. It is not available for, it is available all the time, but we cannot experience pure consciousness without a medium, which is our body, mind, sense complex. Similarly, happiness is existing all the time, but we cannot experience that happiness unless the manifesting medium, a conducive mind, is available. So, the pure happiness, we cannot make contact with or experience it exactly like consciousness. Therefore, the mind, in conducive conditions should be written in bold. Not always. Only when the mind has got conducive condition, the original happiness is reflected in the mind. The Bimbananda is reflected, and that reflection is called Pratibimbananda. Okay. What about the sense objects? How come I get happiness when I contact my near and dear ones? Vedanta says external objects do not give happiness to the mind. External sense object help the mind calm and contented. In fact, I should rephrase it. The gaining of the external sense objects, when my desire is fulfilled, desire for an external sense object is fulfilled, it helps the mind to become calm and contented, satisfied. Because that particular object or person or situation happens to be liked by me, happens to be my desire. For example, when I listen to a Carnatic music program, because I love Carnatic music, when I love Carnatic music alone, it becomes my raga or kama, my desire. So when I have a desire to listen to Carnatic music and I listen to a beautiful Carnatic music recital, it is capable of calming my mind, quietening my mind. The Rajasic mind then becomes non-Rajasic. The agitated mind calms down, becomes a calm mind. That calmness could be either sattvic or tamasic. That's a different matter. We are not particular about that. All that we are particular about is Rajoguna kindles lot of agitation in the mind. And when the mind becomes non-Rajasic, the mind calms down. And that alone is the role of sense objects. Achievement of these desires for sense objects can calm the mind. That's all it can do. But the object by itself can never give happiness because it does not have a happiness in its first place. Moreover, it can only calm my mind only when I love Carnatic music. If I do not have love for Carnatic music or liking for Carnatic music, if somebody is playing Carnatic music around me, it will actually increase the agitation in the mind. Therefore, it is again not the object, the Carnatic music, which is calming my mind. It is my love for Carnatic music, my desire for Carnatic music. When that desire is fulfilled, it calms the mind. Therefore, what we have to understand, if Carnatic music by itself can give me happiness, if Carnatic music has got intrinsic happiness, it should give happiness to everybody all the time. But it does not. It only calms my mind because I have a raga or kama for that. And in that calm, non-rajasic, undisturbed mind, Atmananda gets reflected. Therefore, when I experience, what I experience is Pratibimba Ananda or reflection of my own Bimbananda in my mind, which has become like a mirror. The calmer the mind, the greater the happiness. It is just like cleaner the mirror, truer the reflection. Just as in front of a mirror, I can experience my reflected face, but I cannot experience the original face. Similarly, Bimbananda gets reflected in the mirror-like mind, and Pratibimbananda is formed. What we experience as happiness is nothing but Pratibimbananda, which is reflected happiness, reflected Ananda. Therefore, all experiential pleasures are only reflected at once. Just as I don't experience my original face, I can never experience Bimbananda because it is not experienceable. Bimbananda is ever the experiencer consciousness principle. It is ever the experiencer, never the experienced. But not knowing this fact, we commit a mistake by using a wrong logic. What is that? I had a desire for an object. I contacted that object. Before that, my contacting that object, I did not have happiness. After I contact the object, I got happiness. Therefore, the object is the cause of my happiness. It is just like saying, when I see my face in the mirror, it is like saying the mirror has produced my face. And we have discussed one example also earlier, which Swami Paramathananda quotes in his talks. Of course, he himself says that we do not know whether this is a fact or not. But it's a very widely quoted example. What is that? The dog chewing the bone, a dry piece of bone. If we have observed, if you give a bone to a dog, it will chew it. And not once, because that bone may not have any taste or anything in that. On the contrary, if it bites it hard, it may produce some splinters and all that, which may hurt. That's what actually happens. So the dog bites and chews on a bone which is bone dry. The bone does not have any blood or anything which is liked by the dog. But when the dog bites it, it gets injured because of the sharp edges of the bone, and blood comes out of the dog's own mouth. And the dog mistakes that blood as coming from the bone. The dog uses Anvaya Vyatireka logic. What is that? Before biting the bone, there was no taste of blood. After biting the bone, the taste of blood comes. Therefore, bone must be the source for blood. This is the logic the dog uses. So the harder it bites the bone, the more taste of blood it gets. Similarly, we have made a wrong conclusion about happiness coming from external objects. Because if a dog makes a wrong conclusion, it is understandable. But unfortunately, the entire humanity has made a huge blunder in concluding that happiness comes from external objects, not knowing that we are in fact the only source of happiness, which is revealed by the Vedanta, by the Upanishads. What a mind-boggling revelation. All along, we have ignored the only source of happiness, that is our own self. And we run all over the world getting a glimpse of happiness, a fleeting reflection, and getting disappointed thereafter. Because we experience that after some time, the object which we had a desire for loses its capacity to give even that momentary happiness. So we start looking for newer avenues, newer objects. And this understanding is very important because all our struggle in life is because of this fundamental mistake or ignorance. We are searching everywhere for the Parama Purushartha called Nityananda. Not that Nityananda, the Kailasa. Nitya Ananda. Permanent happiness, eternal happiness. Ignoring the fact that we are that Nitya Ananda Swarupa. We are Nitya Chaitanya Swarupa. We are Nitya Ananda Swarupa. And that experience of Ananda, which is in the form of a Pratibimba Ananda, in a conducive state, mental state arises. And there is one more aspect to this experiential happiness, which again we have experienced. Excuse me. We have to note that the experiential happiness has got gradations. I am happy, I am happier, I am happiest. And Swamiji gives a nice example. See, I go in the market, window shopping, and I see an object of my liking in a shop. That could be a cell phone or a watch or whatever it is, I have been looking for that for a long time. And that I see in the showcase of a shop. And that sight, what we call seeing that object, oh, it is available here, itself gives me joy. Ishta darshana sukham it gives. That one type of joy. So I go into the shop, purchase that object. Till then, the object belonged to the shopkeeper. Now I have purchased it and I own it. Now I am happier because that object I have possessed. I can use it and enjoy it. There is a more happiness because of this. And that is called Ishta Grahana Sukham. Grahana means grasping or possessing. I own it, so I am happier. Then I start exploring, understanding, and using that. Call all my friends on the mobile phone. I bought this, I bought this. Happiest state. Anubhavajam Sukham. So the three states, happy, happier, happiest. Positive, comparative, superlative. Call it in English. Three levels of happiness. So the mind goes through these three types of conducive states. If it is conducive, I am happy. More conducive, happier. Most conducive means happiest state. Shastra gives a name to each one. Conducive state, Priya. More conducive, Moda. Most conducive, Pramoda. So Priya, Moda, and Pramoda states. Three states of happiness. A state means it's a situation rather. It's called a vritti in Sanskrit, a thought. So Priya, Moda, Pramoda vrittis. And in each one of these states, Atmananda gets reflected. course, you may be thinking that we are going into a lot of details, but they are very important to understand what Atma is. Many of you may have many questions. Please save them for the satsang session. Because Vedanta is all about dealing with things which we have never thought about, which have never occurred in our mind. It reveals it opens up a whole new world of thought and forces us to think deeper and deeper and deeper on a particular subject matter. And that is why, Vedanta is not meant for everybody. Most people do not have either the patience or the capacity or capability for such deep thought. Most people do not have analytical mind, because some people, if they think too much, they will develop headache. They're not meant for that. And that is why Vedanta does not appeal to most people. Only very few selected people, Vedanta appeals to them. Because it challenges their intellectual capacity and makes them think more and more and more. It's just like, I think Statesman newspaper or that crossword puzzles come. Some of them are very, very, very difficult crossword puzzles. But there are people who spend days and days and days thinking about the clues and, they complete the crossword. Everybody cannot do that. Only very few people can solve the crossword puzzles, which come in daily. I mean, some of them are very complicated rather. There's a technique you must know how to solve those crossword puzzles. So similarly, Vedanta is also not meant for everybody who are averse to think, averse to analyze the facts of life, who are averse to accept that all along they have been wrong, they could have been wrong. I would put them who do not have open mind about all these things. Okay, I've gone somewhere. So now we have said that the mind in conducive conditions reflects the original happiness. Now the next logical question is, what is that conducive state of mind? To answer this question, Vedanta goes into further analysis and makes a fine observation. A conducive state of mind is, really speaking, the resolved state of the mind. Only when the mind is resolved, in that condition alone, there will be reflection of Ananda. Because an ignorant mind, an agitated mind, continuously produces unhappiness alone. It is just like you go to a pond, still water. You throw a stone, there are ripples formed on the water. Can you see your reflection in the water clearly? The more the ripples, the less clear will be your reflection. You can see your reflection in the water only when the water is calm, undisturbed, without ripples. Similarly, it is only when the mind is resolved and calm, unagitated, the Bimbananda will get reflected in such a mind. An ignorant mind, an agitated mind continuously produces unhappiness only. Constantly in stress, thinking of some work to be done. I have to finish this, I have to finish that. Constantly it is stressed. Constantly it is anxious. Constantly it is insecure. So ignorant mind continuously produces unhappiness. This is the conclusion of Vedanta. And that unhappiness is also of various degrees. Mild anxiety to panic. There is a Upanishad called Amrita Bindu Upanishad, which very beautifully presents this. There are two mantra, first and second mantra of that Upanishad. Manohi dvividam proktam shuddham cha ashuddham eva cha ashuddham kama sankalpam shuddham kama vivarjitam. Very beautiful, very simple Sanskrit. Then it goes on to say, Manayeva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho bandhaya vishayasaktam muktyai nirbishayam smritam. Whole Vedanta in two verses, this Amrita Bindu Upanishad gives, and that too in a very simple Sanskrit. Therefore, as long as an active mind is there, when the Rajoguna is fully active, Ananda is not possible. Every time we experience happiness, it only means that the mind has got resolved for those few moments. So that ignorant mind has gone away for those moments, and so we experience happiness. How can the ignorant mind go away? It can go away in twofold ways. Temporarily, it can go away by resolving into Karana Shariram. Since the mind belongs to the Sukshma Shariram, and Sukshma Shariram itself is born out of Karana Shariram. We discussed all these things when we discussed the Karana Shariram topic. So the ignorant mind has to temporarily resolve into Karana Shariram, and then there will be happiness. And when does this happen? This happens in Sushupti. Naturally, this happens during the deep sleep state. The Sukshma Sharira, the mind resolves into Karana Shariram. In fact, not only the mind, all sense organs, body, mind, sense complex, they actually resolve into Karana Shariram. And that is why in deep sleep state, the Bimbananda gets fully reflected. And we feel very happy, relaxed in that. Resolved does not mean that it has vanished. Resolved means it has become calm, inactive. So when the mind becomes inactive, non-agitated, the Bimbananda reflection it gets. It is still existing, but inactive. So this is the first option. Mind resolving into Karana Sharira. And what is the second option? Second option is Vedanta. The ignorant mind should become a wise mind. Then also there will be permanent happiness. But both these conditions are not met when we get a temporary short-term happiness. That is because, as I explained, the short-term happiness is experienced when the mind is temporarily resolved because of conducive conditions. When the conducive conditions means, one example I gave you, there could be many circumstances when the mind becomes totally relaxed, conducive conditions. For example, many people experience this. When you are lying down on your back, facing the sky, lying on the terrace and facing the Brahmandam, the sky, the entire, all stars and planets and things like that and all. When you look at the totality, the macrocosm, the mind many times completely relaxes, becomes all other thoughts go away. Your only thoughts are, oh my God, how many stars? And we are, just imagine the Milky Way is one small bit of this entire thing. And in that Milky Way, our sun is a very minuscule star. And for that sun, look at the earth. It is still iota of that sun. And I am a part of this earth. So what am I? Looking at this Brahmandam, what is my status? That thought itself will resolve the mind and actually get rid of your ego, or at least dilute your ego to a very large extent. Another experience, which I personally have experienced, which of course I have done it when sitting on a rock in Kanyakumari, looking at the vast ocean in dusk, or just like nightfall is going to take place. Calmness around, no chirping of birds, nothing is there, just the ocean, and maybe the waves, the sound of the mild waves coming. You can feel just sitting there for, it's a kind of a meditation. Alambana is that ocean, the three oceans which we meet in Kanyakumari. Such a beautiful experience. Of course, for me, everybody may not have the same experience. Probably I like that. That is again, mind is temporarily resolved. And Ananda gets reflected, the Bimbananda gets reflected. So when everything is fine with me, I close my eyes and my mind turns inwards. It resolves. There is a saying, some people give happiness wherever they go. Some others give happiness whenever they go. So the wise mind gives happiness wherever it goes because it is always happy, a wise mind. Ignorant mind gives happiness whenever it goes, whenever it resolves. So a conducive mind is a resolved mind. And according to Vedanta, Ananda is reflected not in the mind, but it is reflected in the conducive mind. This is the finer observation of Vedanta we must see. You cannot say Ananda gets reflected in the mind. There is a condition. Only in a conducive mind, Ananda will get reflected. Therefore, to conclude, a conducive mind is a resolved mind, which is called Karana Shariram. In other words, the Karana Shariram is the reflecting medium for Bimbananda, and that is the ultimate conclusion of Vedanta. That is why Anandamaya Kosha is connected with Karana Shariram. And Priya, Moda and Pramoda are treated as the vrittis of Karana Shariram. You can say they are the vrittis of the resolved mind. Various degrees of resolution. And because it is capable of reflecting Ananda hai, Karana Shariram is also called Anandamaya Kosha hai. So Sukshma Shariram can only reflect consciousness, whereas Karana Shariram reflects Ananda, happiness. So whenever we are happy, even though our eyes are open, we don't see anything. Or many times we close our eyes when we are happy, isn't it? Happiness, just close your eyes and enjoy that feeling of that happiness. Wish that this happiness should be long. I mean, it should go on for a long time. So all experience. We must we must analyze every movement of what all we experience. That is what Vedanta is all about. We must keep asking questions. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? What is the reason behind this happening? What is the cause? Is this a cause or is this an effect? These are the questions which should constantly, a sadhaka should seek answers for. Pujya Swamiji says, when a person walks to Kedarnath or say Amarnath cave and all that, and there is Deepa Radhana. When the Deepa Radhana is going on, he closes his eyes and then prays to Bhagavan. And the irony is, he has walked all the way to see the Deepa Radhana. And during that arati, he closes his eyes. Why? He has the sense of fulfillment. Once you are fulfilled, eyes, ears, and all are become totally irrelevant. They are all given by Bhagavan only for the purposes of gaining that fulfillment. Of course, in Kedarnath, when we close the eyes, when the Deepa Radhana is there, we visualize the Bhagavan in our mind, we get happiness, that is temporary happiness. Mind is resolved. Therefore, these Ananda Vrittis are not turned outwards, but they are turned inwards. You don't need eyes, ears, and nose, etc. to experience the Ananda Vrittis. They are Antarmukha Vrittis. Even though all the sense organs may be open, they are not functioning. This Karana Shariram with Priya, Moda, Pramoda Vrittis reflecting Ananda is the Anandamaya Kosha. And this is going to be the essence of this shloka, which actually highlights many finer and subtle points, what we have discussed. So now let us go into the verse proper, based on the above discussions. So what is the definition of Anandamaya Kosha? It is given in the first two lines. Look at the second line. Vrittit tamo jrimbita syat anandamaya priyadi gunakaha. Vrittihi. Anandamaya Kosha contains three types of vrittis or conditions or states known as Priya, Moda and Pramoda. So the word vrittihi in the first line refers to the threefold states or conditions. And this threefold vritti belongs to what? He says tamaha jrimbita. Very important. Tamaha here means mula avidya. Karana shariram. We have already seen mula avidya, which is another name given for Karana shariram. Jrimbita means jadita or janya, born out of. Tamaha jrimbita means born out of tamaha, born out of Karana shariram. Therefore, whenever we are talking about Anandamaya Kosha, we are talking about Karana Sharira Vritti. And this Karana Shariram is a concept discussed only in Advaita Vedanta. You will not find any discussion on Karana Shariram anywhere else. Because forget anything except for Advaita Vedanta and the Upanishads, no other scriptures go into all these details. They don't, their Puranas and all, there's no analysis at all. When we teach or when we learn Bhagavad Gita, many of these analyses come into place because Bhagavad Gita is nothing but a condensation of the messages of the Upanishads. Therefore, while explaining the slokas of Bhagavad Gita, an Acharya will bring all the ideas from the Upanishads, and which is exactly what Adi Shankara has done in his Bhashyam, and all Acharyas in the Parampara follow that methodology. So while teaching Bhagavad Gita, we get into some of these. We may not go into so much details. It all depends upon the interest of the students, how, and also what is relevant time available, etc. Because Bhagavad Gita with Bhashyam, Tika, Tippani, etc., one can learn for 10, 12 years on daily basis, daily class basis. So much is there to learn. But then, given the present circumstances, normally we will stick to something like, I don't know, maybe 400, 500 classes or 600 classes. So that is why Advaita Vedanta only goes into all details. And that is why Advaita Vedanta, among all the darshanas, is most popular. Because normally when we talk about vritti or thought, it is associated with the mind or intellect. There is manovritti or buddhi vritti. That vritti we are not talking here. We are talking about avidya vritti. Avidya means mula vidya. Mula vidya means karana shariram. Therefore, tamo jrumbita vrittihi means karana sharira vritti. That is the vritti that is happening whenever we are happy. Now the next question is, how is this karana sharira vritti generated? This is said in the second line. Swa ishta artha labha udayah. These three types of vritti are born. Udayah means rises or born. Labha, when there is attainment or association of a person with swa ishta artha. Artha means any object or person or situation which is swa ishtam, liked by that person, which is favorable to that person, which is expected by that person. Such a situation is called swa ishta artha. Labha means when I get that, when I gain that, either because of my present as effort or because of my purva janma punya. Because according to Vedanta, every experience that we get, either happiness or suffering or sorrow, is our own karma phalam only. Therefore, it is a disposition of karana sharira generated by an external favorable condition, and that alone is called anandamaya. Now, what is the speciality of this karana sharira vritti? The karana sharira vritti, which is a thought, which is a jadam, does not have happiness in itself. Of course, being a karana shariram, the fineness of its vritti is superior to manovritti. As we have seen, the subtlest is karana shariram. So the vritti also is the subtlest rather. Therefore, at the time of its experience, there is manovritti. That experience is followed by contentment or tripti. And that manovritti resolves into karana sharira vritti. And that karana sharira vritti leads to happiness. So what is the process? When the mind is resolved because of the gain or achievement of the desired object or person or situation, there is a thought occurs. Because of that thought, the mind gets resolved. Resolved into what? Into karana sharira vritti, which is finer than the vishaya vritti. So the vishaya vritti, which is generated by the mind, resolves into karana sharira vritti. And this karana sharira vritti is ananda pratibimba chumbita tanuhu. That vritti is of such fine nature that it is capable of getting associated. Chumbitam means literally chumbitam means kissed. Kissing. But here it means associated, joined. With what? Ananda pratibimba. So here the word Ananda refers to the original happiness, which is the source, which is the very nature of Atma. Atma has got the original nature of happiness. We have already seen that. In this verse, Shankaracharya highlights that fact that Atma has got the original nature of happiness. That is one of the most important takeaways of this sloka. Therefore, the original happiness, like the original consciousness, we can never experience because it cannot become an object. But that original happiness reflects in the mirror called Priya Moda and Pramoda. Therefore, Ananda Pratibimba, with reflected happiness, the Priya Vritti is kissed or contacted or joined. That means whenever we are happy, there is Anatma in terms of this Vritti, and there is also Atma in the form of reflected Ananda. Anatma is the Vritti, and Atma reflection is also there in that. Ananda Pratibimba Chumbita Tanuhu. So it is called reflected happiness or experiential happiness. Now, original happiness is non-experiential, we have seen. And the experiential happiness, as we have seen, has got three grades: happy, happier, happiest, Priya, Moda, and Pramoda vrittis. So he says, Priyadi Gunakaha. Guna means states or conditions or versions. The threefold in the form of Priya, Moda, Pramoda. Shankaracharya mentions only Priya here, but he says Adi. So Priyadi means a person who has studied Upanishads will immediately be taken to Taittiriya Upanishad. Once that mantra is there, Tasya Priyame Bashiraha Modho Dakshinav Pakshaha Pramoda Uttarav Pakshaha Ananda Atma Brahma Pucham Pratishta. So the moment you hear Priya, Moda, Pramoda, you will be taken to Taittiriya Upanishad. So Atma is the Ananda Atma. The Atma is the original Ananda. So Anandamaya Kosha, the threefold reflection, Priyadi Gunakaha come. So this Priyadi Gunakaha endowed with threefold versions of Priya, Moda, Pramoda, depending upon the degree of resolution of the mind. When the mind is active, subject-object duality is there clearly. In happiness, duality becomes indistinct. Therefore, as even the mind resolves more and more and more, Karana Shariram becomes more and more dominant. I enter the Advaita Avastha, in which all differences between subject and object are dissolved. And there is only Ananda Vritti continuing, only happiness which continues. Stop here and continue in the next class. Okay. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnamevavasishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Dhanyavadaha. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Guruji. Hari Om.
Namaskaram, Guruji. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hari Om.
Thank you, Guruji.
Namaskaram.
Namaskaram.
Thank you very much, Guruji. Namaskaram.
Thank you.
Thank you, Guruji, very much.
Hari Om. Namaskaram.
Pranam.
Pranam. Any
Hari Om.
questions? Namaste.
I have questions, but I'll ask next
Dhanyavad, Guruji.
class.
Sorry.
I have questions, but I'll ask next class. Possibly it can resolve in the next session.
Okay. Right. No problem. No issue. Any other questions? Can't see any hands going up. So does it mean that question I can end the session? Yeah, there is somebody is trying to raise the hand, or I can't understand. I can see a lot of fingers on the screen. No, no. Okay. We can close the session and continue next week. Okay. Hari Om. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
Guruji.
Guruji. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Need to listen to it once again before asking
Not
for
once,
any doubt.
many times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this is all now
Thank
getting into the finer detail,
more,
more complicated. So
more
it
and more.
requires, I mean, it's not difficult. If somebody like me can understand all these things, I am very sure that all of you can understand it very well. So it's not a problem.
No.
So
This was a dedicated,
it is quite
completely dedicated study. This is along with other worldly things, trying to do a little bit.
various things, I mean, it is just like that, swimming in water, I mean, there may be various things, but you still manage to swim, isn't it? You're not drowning. Don't allow yourself to drown. You must learn to swim in the samsara ocean rather. Then you can keep your head above all the other things. That is what you have to practice. And Vedanta will help you with that. It is the swimming coach.
Yes, Guruji, absolutely. Thank you very much, Guruji.
Okay,
Hari
Hari
Om.
Om. Thank you. Thank you.